Good afternoon, I'm Rob Boskamp, and you're listening to South Texas Midday. Thank you for joining me on this Friday, December 26th. The Texas Rangers are investigating a Brownsville Police Department-involved shooting after a domestic dispute on Christmas Eve. Brownsville Police Chief Felix Salazar confirmed to KRGV that the suspect, 41-year-old Brownsville ISD employee Gerardo Garcia, is in custody. A police spokesperson said a woman called police around 6:30 a.m. Wednesday to report that her husband, identified as Garcia, shot at her while she and her daughter were in a car driving toward a hospital. They were not struck by gunfire. Officers at the scene found Garcia standing in the middle of the street and returned fire after he reportedly shot at them. Garcia suffered a non-life-threatening gunshot wound. No officers were injured. Brownsville ISD confirmed in a statement that Garcia, an employee from Rivera Early College High School, was involved in the shooting. Salceda told KRGV that Garcia faces multiple charges of aggravated assault against a peace officer, aggravated assault, family violence, unlawful restraint, and criminal mischief. Police confirmed that the officer who shot Garcia is on paid administrative leave. Federal health officials are looking into dozens of illnesses caused by eating raw oysters. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Food and Drug Administration, 64 people in 22 states, including Texas, have fallen ill with salmonella after eating oysters. KHOU 11 in Houston reports that at this time there is no recall. The CDC points out that raw oysters can be contaminated with germs at any time of year. It's advised not to let raw seafood, its drippings, or juices contaminate other foods in the kitchen. Cross-contamination on cutting boards, countertops, and utensils can spread germs beyond the oysters themselves. To make oysters safer to eat, people can either boil them until the shells open or add them to a steamer that is already producing steam and cook them for 4 to 9 minutes. Rounding out this week's edition of KEDT-FM's A Day in the Life series, Emily Salazar takes one last tour behind the scenes of the Corpus Christi Ballet's The Nutcracker. Today, she talks with members of the ballet orchestra bringing Tchaikovsky's music to life.
The Nutcracker would not be the global phenomenon it is without Tchaikovsky's amazing music. Every year, his music comes to life thanks to the musicians with the Corpus Christi Ballet Orchestra, who, with the dancers, create unforgettable performances for the community every holiday season. Come with me to orchestra rehearsal to talk to some of the musicians who help create the magic. This is a day in the life for a night at the Nutcracker. Maestro William Reber is Corpus Christi Ballet Orchestra's fearless leader, celebrating his 36th season with this year's Nutcracker performances. He shares his knowledge of Tchaikovsky's iconic score.
This was fairly late in his life. There were young kids. His brother had some young children and the like, and he wanted to write a Christmas present for them. And so basically, this was a musical and dance Christmas present. His last ballet, just about 4 or 5 years before he died. I don't remember exactly what year this was composed now, but he died in 1893. The other ballet, Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, the other two big ones, were both much more serious topics, and this was designed to just be an entertainment. The most serious music in the whole piece is what we just played, the last 15 minutes of the first act. Most of Act 2 is the tunes that everybody knows, the little specialty dances, plus the big Sugar Plum duet and things of that sort. But it's also much shorter. Act 1 is about 50 minutes long. Act 2 is half an hour at most.
Flutist Dr. Diana Sipes has gotten to know the melodies like the back of her hand, playing for the ballet since 1994. She gives some insight on the musician's mindset in the pit.
I think one thing that's different is you are collaborating with, in our case, people you can't see who are up on the stage, and so the conductor is really the glue that keeps us together. You know, he's watching the dancers and making sure that the music fits with what they need and what they're doing, and we have to watch him so that we are staying with what is happening on stage, because we can't see them when we're down in the pit. But really, pit work is really my favorite work to do, because it really is a collaboration of all the arts, the visual, the dance, the music, the scenery. It's everything. So it's a fantastic experience.
Although Nutcracker season has become a yearly routine for musicians like William and Diana, new members do find their way to the group. Dr. Sarah Renner moved from El Paso in August. She recently finished her first semester as the new professor of oboe and music history at TAM-UCC. She shares her excitement to join the group after being invited by a colleague.
I'm just excited to be back in the pit. I played with a touring orchestra for 3 years with dancers, and so just being able to be back in that environment. It's a different style of playing, and it's just a new adventure every time because something always happens on stage that's a little bit different every time, and so it's pretty fresh time you do it. So that little edge to it is really fun.
A big thank you to William, Diana, and Sarah for their insight into the orchestra's role in creating the magic on stage. This has been a day in the life for a night at the Nutcracker. Thank you for joining me backstage on what I think is one of the most special holiday traditions. I'm Emily Salazar.
Learn more about the Corpus Christi Ballet with KEDT FM's A Day in the Life series. You can check out this and previous episodes of the series wherever you get your podcasts, as well as this week's episodes of South Texas Midday. And in this week's Rio Grande Valley Business Journal section, KEDT's Spencer Cihak chats with multimedia reporter Kristen Mosbrucker-Garza about the opportunities and challenges of data centers in the Rio Grande Valley. We join them now. Good afternoon, guys.
Thank you, Rob. Spencer Cihak here, joined by Rio Grande Valley Business Journal reporter Kristen Mosbrucker-Garza. Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
In recent years, Texas has become a tech hub for many companies, both nationally and internationally. And with that comes a need for these data centers. For listeners who have heard the term but don't quite know what that is, what is their use?
Right. And so a lot of people can think of a data center as essentially a giant warehouse or a series of warehouses that have a lot of really expensive computer equipment in there. And they do these big computations and essentially help the internet survive and thrive.
Fascinating. There's been a lot of interest from data center companies in South Texas. What are some of the opportunities and challenges down in the Rio Grande Valley?
So I think something that's really important for folks to understand is that data centers need three things, right? They need access to water because when you have a computer, it needs to be cooled, and typically that requires some sort of water-based cooling element to it. They also need access to high-speed internet because most of the time they are connected to the cloud in a sense, these computer servers inside. And then the third thing that they use a lot of is energy, right? And so they draw, enough electricity to power tens of thousands of homes, really hundreds of thousands of homes. So, building a data center really requires the electricity of essentially a mid-sized city.
Wow.
And yeah, and that's a challenge in the Rio Grande Valley because as y'all are also having issues up in the Corpus region, water is scarcer than ever, right? We have a drought, and so there's sometimes contention about whether water usage, should go on that industrial scale. Now, sometimes companies can use like reused water in industrial settings or even recycle it themselves because they do typically need like pretty good water quality. So it's something that I think companies are really mindful about and trying to work through. Another piece of it is electricity. So AEP Texas, which covers most of the valley, though we have some other operators, has found that even just for our baseline electricity, so for our existing residential, commercial, and industrial customers, they are at a 30-year high. Like they had 30 years of growth in like 3 years recently, and so the valley requires about 2 gigawatts worth of power already. And because of our transmission systems, we can't always get it. So, we're not necessarily to the point of blackouts or anything like that, but, we don't really have a lot of excess electricity for the most part in our grid system. And so to share it with something that requires a lot of electricity can be a bit of a sticky point, right? And so one way companies are sort of getting around that is we have one company under contract in Harlingen, and they are out of the UK. They're called Ennius Energy. So they are signing a deal with some farmers because there's a lot of agricultural land in the valley even today, and it's all being rapidly developed. So they have under contract about 1,800 acres, and the plan is essentially 16 data center halls. So, imagine like large warehouses, and they, instead of, building something that would require all that electricity and water and power all at once, essentially they're going to build the infrastructure as the valley's infrastructure is built out. So they're sort of trying to grow as quickly as they can within the constraints that we have.
Fascinating. It sounds like there are a number of issues these companies are needing to overcome. What are some of the reasons why they still are interested in South Texas? The water issue and the power issue. What's still driving them to come to the Rio Grande Valley?
I would say that there is just so much demand for computing capacity. With artificial intelligence, there are companies really across the country that are just trying to keep up with, chat GPT and even cryptocurrency. So in Willacy County, near Lyford, there's actually going to be a $50 million data center, and it's going to be in stages. So if they move forward with the plans as they've laid out, like, it's actually all are going to be in stages, but the first stage is for cryptocurrency mining. And in that way, they're actually trying to essentially get around all the constraints, right? Because there's not high speed internet access in a rural community like Willacy County. There's obviously not a lot of water, and there's also not a lot of electricity in that can be transported there. But in Willacy County, over the past decade or so, we've had several large scale wind farms. And so Soluna, this company, Willacy County, actually came to the county because the wind farm operator reached out to them and they said, hey, we have 166 megawatts of wind power that, because of the constrained infrastructure system where essentially the transmission lines are not able to transport electricity in real time across the state where it's needed. They had a lot of excess wind power that was essentially going to waste. And because of all these wind farms were in the same place, they also, when they would sell it on the ERCOT market, they were actually getting negative pricing. So they were really kind of in a bind. They were like, we're producing all this electricity, and we know that data centers require a lot of it. And so why don't we try to solve that problem and still recoup the money that we spent on this giant wind farm, right? So they found this company called Soluna, and they're interesting because they actually don't require nearly as much internet capacity or water that a typical data center would. They kind of consider themselves like a renewable or green data center. And so that's one project that's moving forward in a really interesting way. And the first round is they're going to be using that data center for cryptocurrency, and then future stages is going to be AI. And so it's really just, I think, keeping up with consumer demand, business demand, industrial demand for access to the internet, access to the cloud.
Now, these data centers, they don't typically create a lot of jobs. You spoke a little bit about the economic benefit for wind farmers. What other economic benefits can people expect to come with these data centers?
Yeah, so when I spoke to Willacy County officials, they acknowledged that there weren't a lot of jobs created with a data center because, the company did ask for a tax abatement, right, an economic incentive in exchange for this investment. But they know that the jobs that will be created will actually be pretty high paying jobs, and they are connecting their school system into, routing um, future students to kind of train for those jobs. So, kind of, I think working on the workforce pipeline is one thing that's important to that community. And I feel like the other is that tax abatements in particular roll off after a certain year. And so while the initial 5 years, 10 years will not be on the books, the general overall value that will be 20, 30 years down the line will generate property taxes for the community. So, there's sort of a little bit of a give and take there.
Data centers certainly have been creating a lot of headlines nationally. Just from your coverage, is there anything you think people need to understand about these data centers that they're maybe not hearing just from looking at a headline?
I think that there's a lot of investment for data centers, but I think that companies really are mindful about the resources that it takes to operate them. Increasingly, I think that they're looking for efficiencies, right, when it comes to water usage, alternatives when it comes to building out internet infrastructure. Because one of the things is if Luna in Willacy County really does move forward with the AI portion, they'll actually have to invest in fiber optic cable in Willacy County. So as a result of the data center, that community might actually get better internet access, like larger wires essentially, which is something that would never have happened if a data center didn't get built there.
For people with environmental concerns, is there anything that they should be aware of? Are they speaking some truth? And the project in Willacy was considered a green data center. The project in Harlingen, are there environmental concerns?
I mean, at this point, I haven't heard from environmental groups. Certainly no one's really out there protesting it. I do think how the data center in Harlingen will handle the water issue will definitely make people pay attention. Like I said, we are in a drought. We have a lot of water conservation projects going on, and I'm certain that folks who are being asked to conserve, on a residential level probably wouldn't like it to see a lot of water usage on an industrial scale.
Kristen, it's been so fun to chat. For people that want to know more about these data centers, where can they learn more? And also, what's the timeline expected for these projects to be completed?
The Harlingen data center is in the early stages. So they are under contract for the land, but they probably wouldn't start construction for a couple more years. And so what I'm seeing is probably not till maybe 2030. The project in Willacy County is under construction, and they're moving pretty quickly. They also have sort of a modular style that allows them to construct it efficiently, and so they're trying to get up online as soon as they can. My understanding is it will take about a year or so before people physically see them.
Kristen, thank you so much for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was Kristen Mosbrucker-Garza with the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal, speaking about the opportunities and challenges of data centers in the Rio Grande Valley. And that is the latest news and information on South Texas Midday. I'm Rob Boskamp. Your community arts calendar and more is on the way.